A terrible incident occurred in the village of Isolo. It started with a boy named Obinna. One morning, his mother, Ikenna, found him still in his bed, but he wasn't asleep. He was dead. The worst part was how he looked. His skin was like a dry, pale leaf, and the old woman who washed him whispered that all his blood was gone. There was no cut on his body, not even a scratch. This kind of death makes a whole community silent because it means the danger is invisible and can walk right into your house. Obinna's father, Ngozi, was a strong man, but after this, he started checking the wooden locks on his door again and again, like a worried bird. Everyone looked at their neighbors, but no one saw the evil. We all just knew that a great, silent dread had arrived. But when bad things happen, people look for comfort. The first person to arrive at Ikenna and Ngozi's hut was Mama Ngozi. She was the oldest woman and everyone respected her more than anyone else. She was known for her kind voice, her easy way of making people feel calm, and her strong knowledge of all the forest herbs. She was the anchor of the whole village when the weather was bad or when sadness came. She sat with Ikenna and held her, giving a quiet strength that made everyone breathe a little easier. We trusted her completely and never questioned her wisdom or her timing. In the middle of all that chaos, her calm face was the only thing that felt normal, though I remember noticing that her eyes were strange, completely dry, even while she comforted a mother who couldn't stop weeping. Just 2 market days later, the bad thing happened again. A young woman named Ogechi suddenly got very sick. She was carrying her water pot from the stream when her legs just gave out and she fell. Her whole body was shaking badly, and a fiery heat was burning her up from inside. Even the healers who knew many things were confused. The sickness was too strong and too fast. Ogechi was a robust woman, full of life and laughter, so her quick decline made us all truly terrified. Her husband Jide just sat next to her watching her suffer, his face a total mask of helplessness, while we all stood around murmuring confused and fearful advice. The suspicion started to fall on things like a distant enemy's curse or an angry spirit from the deep forest. No one wanted to believe the evil was living right here, next to them. Mama Ngozi, of course, arrived very quickly this time too. She was carrying a dark, thick paste, a poultice, wrapped tightly in a piece of clean, white cloth. She quickly and sharply dismissed the other confused healers. Her hands moved with a sudden, alarming certainty that made everyone step back. She told Jide that she had a special cure for this fever of the spirit, a powerful herbal remedy. She told him that she had to apply it herself, and that everyone must leave the hut and give her total privacy. Jide was too full of fear and desperation to say no, and the simple sight of her calm authority was enough to silence the others. We all waited outside, exchanging worried, fearful glances, realizing that the only thing keeping our panic in check was our absolute belief in the wise elder Mama Ngozi. Ogechi died a mysterious death just a few hours after Mama Ngozi had put the poultice on her. Jide's deep sorrow quickly changed into a confused, bitter kind of anger. He kept staring at the white cloth that held the poultice, wondering if the cure was too strong or if his wife was already too far gone to save. These quick one after another deaths completely shattered the village's feeling of safety. People started to avoid looking directly at one another, suddenly afraid to truly see the person standing next to them. The air became thick with unsaid accusations and a crushing dread. The oldest men and women called for a solemn meeting to talk about the darkness that walks among us, because they all knew the simple harmony of our community was breaking apart completely. At the very important meeting, the oldest elder, Papa Okoro, stood up and spoke with a voice that was shaking with deep emotion. He declared with certainty that the recent deaths were the work of Uroi, a powerful, very malicious village witch. He explained that a true Uroi is subtle. She works from right within the community, secretly feeding on the life force of the strongest and youngest people. This terrifying theory confirmed everyone's worst fear, The evil was our neighbor, someone we knew and completely trusted. The collective gaze of the people swept nervously around the circle of faces, but no one's eyes stopped on Mama Ngozi. She sat there respectfully, her head gently bowed in quiet, total agreement with the tragic diagnosis. After the meeting, everyone started watching each other very closely. They stopped sharing food with their neighbors. Mothers kept their little children inside as soon as the sun went down. Small, completely normal behaviors now looked suspicious to everyone. Traveling late at night, a quick, sudden burst of laughter, or giving an unusual gift. The fear was creating tiny, sharp cracks in the community's trust. Papa Okoro's grandson, a young man named Ikenna, who was known for his sharp eyes, started to notice Mama Ngozi's composure. Her house used to welcome many people, but now it sat silent. Its straw roof was too neat and its clay walls too smooth, making it stand out as a center of untouchable, strange order. Ikenna was restless with worry and couldn't sleep, so he decided to quietly investigate the herbal remedies that had failed Ogechi. He was a good hunter and knew the deep forest very well, so he went to question the other healers. An old woman mentioned a very rare red root that only grew in one small, dark part of the swamp. She said that Mama Ngozi was the only one who had harvested it the season before, claiming she needed it for a very serious case in a distant, faraway town. A cold, heavy knot suddenly tightened in Ikenna's gut. Mama Ngozi's story didn't fit the timing of her immediate, quick presence at both of the tragic deaths. The truth felt like it was starting to peek out from behind the curtain. Ikenna, feeling a growing sickness in his stomach, started watching Mama Ngozi's hut. He hid himself behind the huge, thick roots of the Iroko tree near the edge of the clearing. He watched her perform completely normal domestic tasks during the bright day, sweeping her dusty yard, tending a small cooking fire. She looked entirely ordinary, and Ikenna actually started to doubt his own sanity, wondering if his fear was making him see things. But his strong farmer's intuition, which had always kept him safe, warned him that things were not what they seemed. Her movements were too graceful for her advanced age, her energy too consistent, never showing the small human frailties that marked all the other elders. Something was deeply wrong with this perfect piece. Late one night, Ikenna was jolted suddenly awake by a very faint, unnatural sound that seemed to cut cleanly through the usual quiet of the night. He watched the silent hut. The glowing coals of the cooking fire were long dead and black, but a small, sharp light began to flicker in the deepest, darkest part of her yard. Mama Ngozi emerged from the hut, wrapped in a dark, shapeless piece of cloth. She walked with a strange, gliding speed straight toward the hidden light. Ikenna stayed completely frozen in his hiding spot, his breath caught in his throat like a trapped animal. This was definitely not the slow, quiet walk of a tired, old woman getting water. This was something else entirely, something predatory. Ikenna pushed past the huge, paralyzing wave of fear and began to crawl silently closer through the tall, dry grass. He carefully peered over a small, crumbling mud wall and saw a small, flat altar hidden under a very thick bush. Mama Ngozi was kneeling on the ground. The small light he had seen came from a bowl of dark oil burning with an intense, unnaturally steady flame. She was not chanting or singing. She was simply placing tiny, quiet objects, bits of feather, dried leaves, and worst of all, small scraps of bright, colorful cloth like those worn by little children, onto the stone altar. Her actions were precise, terrifyingly deliberate, and completely without emotion. As she worked, Ikenna saw a subtle, truly shocking shift in her appearance. The wrinkles on her face seemed to deepen, but not from old age, but from a dark, focused concentration. Her movements became less like a human and more like a reptile, cold and totally focused on its prey.
She lifted her hand slowly, and the flame in the oil bowl suddenly leapt high, casting sharp, crazy dancing shadows that made her look huge and monstrous against the tiny hut wall. Ikenna was forced to quickly look away, a visceral horror churning his stomach like spoiled milk. His mind was screaming that the village's beloved elder was a terrible, living lie.
The very next day, Ikenna, trembling but determined, tried to speak to Papa Okoro. He chose his words with extreme care, avoiding any direct accusation, only describing the strange flickering light in the hidden altar. Papa Okoro listened patiently, his wise eyes filled with deep weariness, not suspicion. He quickly dismissed the entire tale as Ikenna's youth and stress playing tricks on him, reminding him of Mama Ngozi's lifelong service and countless acts of kindness. He insisted again that the true enemy must be waiting outside the village walls. Ikenna was crushed by the refusal to believe him, realizing the power of deep-rooted trust was thicker and stronger than any mud wall. Ikenna realized with a sick feeling that his evidence was only a fearful, blurry memory, and absolutely no one would dare to challenge the lifelong authority of the beloved elder. He saw Mama Ngozi sitting calmly under the shade of the big tree, weaving a simple mat. She looked up and met his eye, but her expression was totally blank, completely devoid of any recognition or malice, just the quiet focus of a working elder. Ikenna walked on, his terror compounded by the terrible knowledge that he knew the monster but was completely unable to expose her. The terrifying truth was trapped inside him, a heavy, extremely dangerous secret that could not be shared. The very next death was Okwuchi, a young mother known for her beautiful singing voice. She was found dead outside her hut at the first light of dawn. Her body was completely untouched, but her neck was twisted at a shocking, impossible angle. The villagers saw a single, huge black vulture perched silently on a nearby rooftop, watching the commotion with an unnerving, cold stillness. An old hunter whispered that the presence of the vulture was a sign that the spirit was violently ripped from the body, not simply departed. The hunter quickly chased the massive bird away, his fear thinly disguised as simple duty. But the image of the silent waiting vulture lingered, a terrifying messenger of pure evil. Mama Ngozi arrived then, wailing loudly, her sorrow suddenly more loud and performative than before. She beat her chest with her fist and cried out, calling Okwuchi her own daughter, insisting the death was the saddest blow they had suffered yet. Her dramatic show of grief worked perfectly. The villagers were distracted from the terrible sight and focused instead on comforting her. Ikenna watched her, seeing the acting for what it truly was, a desperate attempt to control the focus. He noticed a tiny, almost invisible scratch on her thumb, an injury that seemed too small and insignificant against her grand, loud display of heartbreak. Ikenna could not shake the vivid image of the small scratch on Mama Ngozi's thumb. He remembered the old, forgotten folklore about the Uroyi needing a small blood sacrifice, sometimes even a tiny drop from themselves, to seal the most malicious, complex curses. The next day he found a loose thread from Mama Ngozi's dark cloth clinging to the wall right near Okwuchi's hut. He picked it up slowly, holding the tiny piece of evidence, realizing that the scratch was not an accident, but a sign of a dark, evil contract. He knew he needed proof that everyone in the village would believe, not just a simple thread and a terrible feeling. He needed something solid to show them. Ikenna, now completely consumed by his dangerous knowledge, decided he had to sneak into Mama Ngozi's hut during the day while she was at the distant farm. He felt physically sick with fear and guilt, but Okwuchi's broken neck compelled him forward. The hut was perfectly clean and orderly. He searched, overturning baskets and feeling under the mats. He found nothing, and he started to panic, believing she must have seen him. Just as he was about to give up and leave, his foot kicked a loose floorboard near the fireplace, which revealed a small, very dark space under the house. Ikenna quickly used his sharp hunting knife to pry up the loose board. Hidden below were small, shriveled, grotesque dolls made of dried roots and tied tightly with human hair. They looked like tiny, distorted people, and each one bore a striking, terrible resemblance to a dead villager.
He immediately recognized the doll with the too pale face as Obinna, and the doll with the twisted neck as Okwochi. The horror was total and physical. His hands trembled so violently he almost dropped his knife to the floor. The smell rising from the dark hole was metallic and earthy, the unmistakable smell of dark magic and cold ritual death. Ikenna dug deeper into the dark hole with his knife. He found a tiny, intricately woven pouch. Inside was a small, polished bone fragment. But the most horrifying and truly sickening find was a small folded piece of thick paper with a drawing on it, a simple stick figure with a huge black X drawn violently across the chest. He recognized the simple, shaky, unique lines of the drawing immediately. It was drawn with the same unique hand that Papa Okoro used to mark his best goats. The truth of the witch's next intended victim hit him with a paralyzing, crushing force. Ikenna carefully put the terrible paper and the dolls into his hunting bag and quickly replaced the loose floorboard, his mind racing faster than a hare. He knew that the drawing of the marked man meant that his own grandfather, Papa Okoro, was next. The immense weight of the secret now had a crushing, immediate deadline. He rushed back toward the village center, trying desperately to look calm, but moving with a desperate, wild speed. He saw Mama Ngozi walking back from the farm, carrying a heavy load of firewood, her face perfectly peaceful. He avoided her eyes, knowing a single glance could easily betray his secret and sign his own death warrant. Ikenna burst into his own hut, locked the wooden door, and spread the dark evidence on the packed earth floor. He stared at the dolls and the marked paper. He knew he could not simply show this to the village. They would execute him for accusing their beloved elder. He decided instantly that he must go to the chief's palace in the next town, where the authority was stronger than the local village loyalty, even though the journey was long and dangerous, and Mama Ngozi was still out there, free. Ikenna slipped quietly out of the village as soon as the last light of the sun faded, moving quickly into the thick bush, praying that the ancestral spirits would hide his path. He knew the witch would immediately feel the violation of her hidden space, and she would be coming for him. He kept the terrifying cargo of the dolls close to his chest. The dark forest was loud and hostile, full of shadows that looked like old women and thick branches that grasped like claws. His only comfort was the heavy, physical presence of the dolls, the undeniable, solid proof of the murders. He pushed his body past exhaustion, driven by the horrifying image of Papa Okoro's marked chest. Ikenna reached the river, which was usually a shallow, gentle crossing, but the water was now churning, dark and impossibly deep, flowing with a vicious, unnatural current. He instantly knew this was not a natural flood. The water was being held and used against him. He heard a sharp, low, rhythmic clicking sound coming from the opposite bank, a sound that cut cleanly through the roar of the water and froze him in his tracks. He realized with a sickening lurch that the witch knew his exact location and was patiently waiting for him to try and cross.
The terrible clicking sound stopped abruptly, and the river water instantly turned into a violent black wave, crashing angrily against his bank, spraying cold, dark foam that smelled of the swamp. Ikenna retreated quickly, his mind screaming that the witch was playing a cruel game with him, making the natural world her weapon. He knew he could not cross the river. He collapsed behind a large sheltering rock, clutching the dolls. He realized he must double back immediately and find a different, longer path, knowing that every single minute he lost was a minute closer to the witch finding him and Papa Okoro being marked for death. Ikenna chose a narrow, winding deer path that led away from the river, deep into a section of the forest known for old, confusing spirits and thick, overwhelming confusion. He ran and ran, forcing his tired legs forward as hard as he could. The terror was no longer a distant dread. It was a close, suffocating shadow that pressed hard against his back. He felt a sudden, sharp pain in his ankle, a twisted ligament, but he didn't dare stop, only favoring his good leg, knowing a moment of rest meant total capture and death.
As Ikenna struggled and stumbled through the thicket, he started to feel an unbearable coldness spreading across his skin, a deep chill that had absolutely nothing to do with the night air. He realized with a jolt that he was no longer alone in the dark. He saw a faint, fleeting movement in the trees ahead, a flicker of dark cloth. He knew she was right there, moving through the forest faster than any human being. A silent, predatory ghost waiting for him to fail. He dropped the heavy hunting bag containing the dolls, knowing that the proof was slowing him down too much to survive. Ikenna quickly grabbed the one item he absolutely could not leave behind, the small piece of paper with Papa Okoro's marked stick figure. He left the gruesome dolls, the undeniable proof, hidden under a pile of leaves, hoping to somehow return for them, choosing immediate survival over evidence. He sprinted blindly, clutching the paper tightly, driven by the singular goal of saving the elder's life. His mind screamed that he had only one chance to speak the terrible truth, and he had to get out of the dark forest alive. Ikenna crashed out of the dark forest, stumbling hard onto the main hard clay road that led to the chief's palace. He was bleeding, twisted with pain and utterly broken, but he was out. He looked back at the dark, silent mouth of the trees, expecting to see the silent elder emerge, but there was only quiet darkness. He started hobbling down the road, the paper gripped tightly in his hand, seeing the distant, faint lights of the next town. He knew, with a rush of relief and adrenaline, that he had won the first, most important battle. As Ikenna hobbled slowly forward, a sharp, familiar metallic clicking sound, faster and much closer than before, cut the air from the trees right beside the road. He felt the ground vibrate under his feet. He quickly turned his head and saw a huge, dark, shapeless mass emerging from the trees, gliding swiftly and silently toward him. It was no longer an old woman. It was a monstrous, silent shape of pure, focused malice, and it was gaining on him very quickly. The lights of the chief's palace were still agonizingly far away.